Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan, and today I want to talk about 3 recent sci-fi reads picked by my subscribers, and let you know my thoughts on each of them, as well as what kind of readers may or may not enjoy them. So let's get started with Electric Forest by Tanith Lee. Magdala was Indigo's only genetic misfit, the shunned outcast of an otherwise ideal society. But one day her world is turned upside down when she is presented the chance to go undercover. She is awakened to all of the potential around her, as well as the perils poised above Indigo. Quick story, there's a particular edition of Electric Forest that I really like the cover of, so I found one online, ordered it, and unfortunately it never arrived. I contacted the seller and they told me that it seemingly got lost in the mail somewhere around Utah, so hopefully someone in Utah enjoyed reading it. So I thought, no worries, I saw plenty of other copies available, but then when I went to find one, there weren't any more available, and I started tripping out. I thought, did I just make that up, or had, coincidentally, those copies just been bought up in the meantime? Now, this was the Patron pick for the month of April, so it's possible that I did this to myself, that my subscribers, you guys, bought up all of those copies, the one that I was trying to find. So let me know. Let me know in the comments. If any of you guys did pick up a copy of Electric Forest, let me know, because I'm very intrigued to get to the bottom of that mystery. Anyway, in the end, I did eventually find one and paid a higher price for a copy in worse condition than the one I originally ordered. But when it comes to classic books, I don't mind if they're a little bit beat up, as I think it does give them a little bit of character. And as you can see with the one that I purchased, yeah, it's got some character to it, but I like it. I'm happy I finally got this copy, so all was well in the end. Electric Forest has a bit of a classic fairy tale type quality to it. It reminded me a little bit of Frankenstein as well as The Ugly Duckling, and when you're thrown into a world and you don't yet quite have a complete understanding of it, it is nice to have those kinds of references to pull from, as well as some themes that you can expect to dive into. I think the character writing is one of the strengths of this book. At first, Magdala does seem a little bit passive, but that makes sense given her lowly position in society, and I found her character development to be believable as she experiences the events that she does throughout the book. There's some villains in the book that I thought Tanith Lee brought to life by giving them some interesting personalities and perspectives. It could have been possible to approach some of the themes in a one-dimensional way, but I think she did a great job of providing various characters different philosophies. Tanith Lee has an interesting writing style. I find some writers to be rather choppy, whereas other writers seamlessly flow from one sentence to the next. When it came to Tanith Lee and her prose, I found that she had a lovely flow to her writing that was punctuated by very jarring turns of phrase. She used some metaphors that were so obtuse that it almost pulled me out of the reading experience, but I also liked stopping for a moment to just kind of ponder how unique they were and try to unpack their meanings. I really enjoyed the first half of the story, but then in the second half, I felt like it did rely quite a lot on info dumps in order to progress the narrative. I found the ending to be rather satisfying, but then there's an epilogue, and I won't say too much for spoiler reasons, but make sure to read the epilogue. At first, I hated it, but then after a little while mulling on it for some time, I was mixed on it. I'm going to be interested to hear your guys' reactions to the epilogue for this one. This is new wave science fiction focusing on the characters and themes, so if that's something you enjoy, it might be worth picking this one up. For me, this was a unique reading experience. I loved the first half, and while I don't think it quite stuck the landing, I still enjoyed it overall. For me, it was an 8 out of 10. Alright, up next we have Inverted World by Christopher Priest. The city is winched along tracks through a devastated land full of hostile tribes. Rails must be freshly laid ahead of the city and carefully removed in its wake. But if the city does not move, it will fall farther and farther behind the optimum and into the crushing gravitational field that has transformed life on Earth. The only alternative to progress is death. This book was kindly sent to me by a subscriber, Cheryl. I didn't have to scrounge the internet for a rare copy of this one, so that's much appreciated, Cheryl. I'll let you know up top, there's 3 things I liked about Inverted World and 3 things I didn't. Of the things I liked, first and foremost was the central idea. There is a concept in this book that I think I will remember for the rest of my life. It is undoubtedly one of the most interesting sci-fi ideas I've ever read in a science fiction book. Secondly, I quite like Priest's writing style. It had quite a nice pace to it, and I really enjoyed the descriptions. I felt like I got a great sense of this unique world that he created. And lastly, the second half of this book in particular is packed full of ideas. Things start to get pretty weird in a good way, and it was at that point that I became invested in the book's mysteries. When it comes to the things that didn't work for me, I found the first half of the book a little bit boring. After the initial setup that I liked, not much else happened that really hooked me in until around the halfway mark. The next thing that didn't click for me is that, and this is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, there were large sections of the book where characters would withhold information from each other without any logical reason to do so. Rather, instead it felt like the author was doing so in order to try and create more tension. Now, I love a mystery, but I want that mystery to arise organically through the story. I don't enjoy the feeling of an author's hand artificially creating information gaps. You don't have to let the audience know everything, but I feel like there are better ways to create mysteries than by having characters behaving in an inauthentic way in order to just try and hold on to those mysteries, those reveals, for as long as possible. And the final thing that didn't work for me was the ending. There are some really cool ideas in the back half of this book that get explained away with a single throwaway sentence, and I felt like those ideas were so interesting and important to the story that they deserve to be more of a focus and more detail than they ended up getting. This is a tough book for me to rate because the highs are stratospherically high. I could see myself decades from now lying on my deathbed and someone asked me, let's say they were a subscriber, maybe even a Patreon member, link in the description. They asked me, Jonathan, what are the top 10 science fiction ideas you've ever read? And honestly, I think one from this book might come to mind. And yet, there were significant portions of the book that also frustrated me. I think you could describe this book as hard sci-fi, and yet, at times, it also kind of reads like fantasy. So, in terms of your preferences from the softer to harder end of the sci-fi spectrum, wherever you are, I think there's still a chance you might like it. And what's interesting is, everybody that I know that has read this book loved it. So there's obviously something about it that is resonating with people, and parts of it resonated with me, just not all of it. I'm a little conflicted, I'm a little mixed. In the end, I'm going to have to go with a 6 out of 10. And lastly, we have The First 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North. Harry August is on his deathbed. Again. No matter what he does or the decisions he makes, when death comes, Harry always returns to where he began, a child with all the knowledge of a life he has already lived a dozen times before. Nothing ever changes, until now. The First 15 Lives of Harry August, as you can probably tell from the title, is a time travel / time loop story, and this is definitely one of my favorite subgenres. I feel like any time loop story has some fun inbuilt questions to solve. For example, why is the time loop happening? Can you get out of the time loop? What would you do differently if you could live your life over and over again? And how can we use the time loop in order to solve the central problem? This book does a great job of introducing you to the character of Harry August and making you care about this particular time loop. I really enjoyed the fresh perspectives it gave us on the different time periods as well as the different obstacles. The book is fairly plot focused, which I think is what I want when reading a book with a somewhat elaborate premise. It reminded me a little bit of the book Replay by Ken Grimwood, which I'm a fan of. I think I connected a little bit more with the characters and themes in Replay, but the plot and pacing of The First 15 Lives had me turning the pages faster. I think this is a book that will appeal to science fiction readers as well as a general reading audience, perhaps in a little bit of a similar way to Blake Crouch. In fact, I think my dad would really enjoy this, so I might have to buy it for him and then report back to you with his review. Something interesting about this book was there were times where I felt like something didn't make sense, but then it would be cleared up. Or I thought I'd found a plot hole, but then it would be explained. Claire North did a really good job of setting up questions and answering them, creating an itch, and then scratching it. Overall, this was a fun, fast read with some visceral moments. I don't think I connected with it on a deep level that has really stayed with me since I finished reading it, but I definitely had a good time and I'm glad I read it. For me, this was an 8.5 out of 10. So those are my thoughts on the patron picks from March, April, and May. I enjoyed 2 of them, and I enjoyed parts of the other, with The First 15 Lives of Harry August narrowly edging out Electric Forest as my favourite. And if you're interested in what the patron pick will be for June, welcome to the Quantum Wheel, where all of the patron picks are both simultaneously picked and not picked until we observe a winner. Let's find out what I'll be reading in the month of June. We got a big Quantum Wheel this week. Lots of great sci-fi choices. What is it going to land on? Could be Dawn, or will it? I think Dawn's going to hold on. It does! Sorry, Sphere, you were so close, yet no Quantum Wheel pick for you. Dawn by Octavia E. Butler, the first book in the Xenogenesis trilogy, is the winner. So I know a lot of people are a fan of this book, although I had a couple people say they weren't as keen on it. Let's see what I think about it after I read it. That's kind of how this thing works. Read it in June if you're interested. We'll find out together. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash or just gently click the subscribe button. And if you really enjoyed it, consider checking out the perks of becoming a Patreon member, such as getting to vote for the Patron Pick of the Month as one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs, including Nima, A New Eden, Half Ogre, Zakawe, and the Quantum Colin. And you can find more sci-fi content over here.